Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we're going to go over all of the new and recently updated radar detectors. Now, we've got a lot to go over here in this video. The last time we did a video like this was back in July, and over the past 4 months, we've had quite a few changes here. We've got some new radar detectors, we've had a lot of updates, plus I want to talk about some of the stuff that we can expect here over the next couple months. Additionally, we recently had Prime Day with a bunch of discounts and whatnot on different radar detectors, plus we've got Black Friday and Cyber Monday coming up, and I know there's going to be some really nice discounts coming up, plus I've actually got a couple giveaways coming up as well for both different radar detectors as well as dash cams, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And as I mentioned, I've got a lot to cover here in this video, so I'm going to quickly run through the highlights, and then down in the video description you're going to find links to more information about everything that I talk about, as well as links to where you can purchase any of these detectors. And with that said, let's jump right into it. So starting off with the Uniden R7. This was recently updated to firmware version 1.33. This update brings a bunch of nice little changes here to the R7, including improved BSM filtering, though the BSM filtering is still not on par with other detectors like the V1 Gen 2 or the Redline 360C. But nevertheless, I'm really glad to see Uniden continue to work on the BSM filtering because that is an area where the R7 could use some improvement. Uniden has also split up the menu into different basic and expert modes, depending on if you want a simpler or more advanced experience. The detector now has fewer false alerts on MRCD. It's got a new option to mute any rear K-band alerts where they're probably going to be less of a threat. And it's got a number of other minor changes as well. I've got all the information available on my website, and I've done a video about this as well if you'd like more information. Now, regarding auto lockouts, that is still being developed and tested. It's not quite ready for prime time yet, but Uniden does continue to work on that. Additionally, I've been noticing recently the pricing on Amazon has been fluctuating quite a bit. It normally retails for $500, but I've been seeing it drop down to $460, $420, etc. So if you're in the market for an R7, maybe something to check out. Next up, we've got an update here for both the Uniden R1 and the R3. These have been updated to firmware version 1.54. This is a really minor update. It just introduces two new MRCD specific features. Otherwise, the MRCD detection itself is the same as before, along with the long-range performance and the BSM filtering. Those are unchanged. But if you have MRCD in your area, you've got 1.54 available now, which is going to help improve things for you. Next up, we've got the upcoming Uniden R9. This is going to be a custom installed radar detector that Uniden is going to be releasing. You can think of it as like a custom installed version of the Uniden R7 with antennas that are going to be mounted in the grille of your vehicle rather than having the detector mounted up on the windshield. And because it's kind of like a custom installed version of the R7, you've got both front and rear antennas to give you the directional arrows. The R9 is going to compete with other detectors like the Radenso RCM or the Escort Max CI360. I don't know exactly when it's going to be available or the expected price point. I'm hoping since it's a unit detector, it winds up being less expensive and a good bang for the buck and maybe a good competition to the NetRadar DSP, for example. Additionally, the R9 is also going to come with Uniden's laser jammers. Now, I'm a little skeptical about this because the company that makes Uniden's, well, radar detectors and laser jammers, it's the same company that develops K40's products, and if they're reusing the same technology for Uniden's laser jammers that they're using for K40, it's not going to be all that great, but they could definitely maybe use different technology like what we saw with K40 radar detectors versus Uniden radar detectors. The Unidens are definitely going to be much better performing. So I'm not really sure, but we're going to have to wait and see what testing is like whenever that comes out. Now, speaking of new detectors coming out, let's talk about the Radenso Theia. This is a detector that everybody is very excited about, myself included. Now, I know everybody's been wondering when is a detector going to be available. Radenso has announced on their website that pre-orders and the actual shipping date are still not yet announced. However, it is expected to come out here by the end of the year here in 2020. And right now, it really seems like it's crunch time for Radenso. I know a lot of you guys have asked like why they stopped making videos. They've actually posted about that and just talked about how it's John, the owner of the company, who's been doing all the video shooting and the editing and whatnot. And that honestly takes a ton of time. Let me tell you. Plus, he's having to pull the engineers off the development process to shoot the videos, and that's why there haven't been as many videos. But now that everybody's focusing on the development and the engineering, they're continuing to work on Theia to get it out here by the end of the year. Now, is Radenso going to be able to live up to this timeline? I have no idea. This is just the latest information that they're sharing. I certainly hope so, of course, but what I think is probably most important is to make sure that with all the big expectations that they've been setting in place, that it's able to actually live up to those expectations, you know? As the saying goes, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. And so I hope that when it does launch, it really does live up to expectations. That's the biggest thing that I'm hoping for. Probably more so than if it comes out this year like they're saying, or maybe if it gets delayed and comes out next year sometime. Now, Radenso has also mentioned that before pre-orders are available, they're going to send me a detector so that I'll have a chance to put it through its paces and see what it's like. And so once pre-orders are available, I'll definitely keep you guys posted with my initial impressions of Theia. I'll have a chance to do some long-range testing to see how it compares to other detectors, to see if it actually can filter out all BSMs, and basically see if it lives up to the hype of being the ultimate radar detector. I'm really curious, and I'm looking forward to that. So if you guys are too, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel and definitely hit the bell notification icon. That way you'll find out as soon as new videos are available. Plus, you can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or sign up for my email newsletter if you'd prefer to get notified that way. And all that information, just like everything else, will be linked down in the video description. Next up, let's take a look at the Escort Redline 360C. This has been updated to firmware version 1.4. And this latest update has done things like improve the responsiveness of the arrows. They've addressed some of the overdriving issues to where it may incorrectly report too many signals, and they've also added a new spec display feature as well. Now, as far as some of the current issues that still remain here with the detectors, some people are reporting Ka falsing here with their Redline 360C. I haven't seen it myself, but I know some people have. There's also been concern about the arrow accuracy not quite being spot on, which I can confirm that does still need a little bit of work. Plus, some people are seeing laser falses in some BMWs, for example, with the iDrive system or other European cars. There's a little bit of work being done, maybe tweaking the firmware versus maybe just needing to physically reposition the detector so it's not falsing to the displays in the car. That's been a pretty common thing too. Additionally, Haywood had a chance to do some MRCD testing up in Canada and found that the Redline 360C is completely ineffective against the MRCD up there. So that's definitely something that needs some work as well. Now, Escort is aware of these different issues and said that they are actively working on it, and they expect to actually have maybe several releases available for this. They may have one update in the next coming weeks, plus an additional update maybe a few months down the line for some of the other issues. In the meantime, Escort has also mentioned that they're working on international versions of both the Redline 360C as well as the Max 3. These international detectors are not yet ready for release, and I'm not exactly sure what the changes are going to be for those, but we can expect those in the coming months. Now, speaking of the Max 3, there's been a couple updates for this detector as well. First, we had firmware version 1.2, which gave us some much needed improvements when running the detector in auto mode, and then we got firmware version 1.3, which was designed to improve the detector's latch times after it stops detecting a signal. Then some of the features that were added to the Redline 360C and the Max 3 have also been brought over to the Max 360 and the Max 360C. For example, those detectors now have the same K-notch feature available to help filter out some of the false alerts from Hondas and Acuras that you'll experience. Additionally, they've added auto JTK support if you're running those detectors paired with Escort's laser jammers like the ZR5 or ZW5, so now they have the ability to automatically shut off after 4, 6, 8, or 10 seconds. The latest versions of these detectors are firmware version 1.10 or 1.13 for the original Max 360, depending on which version you have, as well as firmware version 1.12 for the Max 360C. Now, as for Escort's app, Escort Live, there's been some fixes here, particularly in case you have any Escort Live alerts that get stuck on screen. In case you're driving down the road and the detector is not able to continue updating the distance to the alert ahead and that alert gets frozen on screen, the detector is now just going to automatically clear that stuck alert after 10 seconds. Additionally, it also looks like Escort is integrating with some manufacturers such as BMW to where the Escort Live information and the live radar threats are actually going to be available directly in some new BMW vehicles, which is kind of cool. Those cars are now going to have things like red light camera and speed camera alerts, as well as the Escort Live notifications showing up directly in the vehicle, even if people aren't running an Escort radar detector, which is kind of interesting. It's pretty cool to actually see some OEM integration with radar detector technology. Next up, taking a look at the Valentine 1 Gen 2, there's been some issues here for those of you who want to upgrade from your older Gen 1 V1s to the new V1 Gen 2. Their upgrade process has been unavailable for months, and there's been issues of people who've sent in their older V1s for updates and have literally been sitting for several months without getting their newer V1s back in. And so for the time being, Valentine has completely paused accepting older detectors for trade-ins, and you can only just purchase a new detector directly. Though that said, a lot of times you can actually sell your older V1s and get more than what Valentine will give you as a trade-in for the detector, but it certainly is convenient just to trade in your older detector and simplify the process. So if you're looking to get a V1 Gen 2, upgrades are unavailable, just sell it separately and purchase the new V1 Gen 2 itself. Now, depending on when you go to buy the detector though, you might notice that it's going to be out of stock. Due to the pandemic, they're having inventory issues off and on, just like most every radar detector company nowadays, so you're not always going to be able to find the detector in stock. Now, the latest version of the V1 Gen 2 is firmware version 4.1019, which does seem to work pretty well. There is a known issue with the ramp up not being aggressive enough, and I've actually heard one or two people actually getting tickets with the V1 because it wasn't alerting properly at close range. And this is a known issue that Valentine is aware of, and they're saying that in the next update we can expect the ramp up to change and improve, especially when you're getting stronger close range signals. And on a related note, a number of people have reported that when the detector picks up a really strong signal at close range, it may overdrive and display way too many signals simultaneously, even if there's only actually one or two signals present. This too is a known issue that it sounds like Valentine should be addressing in a future update. Then as far as accessories, I did a video a little while ago talking about the different concealed displays that are available. This way you can get a secondary display for your Valentine 1 and put that display maybe where it's somewhere more convenient, plus you've got a remote mute button to mute the detector. Now what's new to talk about here is Full Color Defense now has their modified thinner concealed displays available for pre-order. They're about 40% thinner than the stock V1 Gen 2 concealed displays, so they're going to be more compact and less bulky. Plus, instead of having the RJ11 port on the side, so you've got the cable sticking out the side, on these new modified thinner concealed displays, the cable actually can run out the side, or you can actually pull it out the back, so you don't see the cable at all, which will give you a cleaner looking install in your vehicle. Now, these modified concealed displays are going to retail for $135, though if you pre-order them, you can get them for 15 bucks off for 120 bucks. And then these modified concealed displays are expected to start shipping later this month here in November. Now, the colored Gen 2 concealed displays are not yet available for pre-order, but I've been told that we can expect that coming in maybe the next 2 weeks or so. Now, if you don't need the thin concealed displays, it looks like Valentine has enough of the stock concealed displays available now to where you can just head on over to their website and order them. Plus, they are half the price of the thin concealed displays. Next up, quickly talking about Stinger. Their radar detector was updated to version 4.10.09, and this update is going to give you improvements to certain types of section controls, kind of point-to-point systems that are used overseas in Europe, and this is especially helpful for drivers on the A2 highway in the Netherlands. Now, moving on to K40, they've recently released a new windshield mount radar detector called the Platinum100. Now, internally, it shares the same fundamental platform as a Uniden DFR7 or DFR9. And compared to their previous detectors, it adds an LNA for improved performance, so instead of performing like a Uniden DFR5, it's going to perform closer to a DFR7 or a DFR9. Now, if you take a closer look at the detector, you'll notice that, like the Unidens, it's got a 2-digit frequency display. It's got a color display like the DFR9. It's got GPS as well as manual GPS lockouts, though it does not have red light camera or speed camera alerts. Now, that said, they are adding MRCD and MRCT support, which is a first for K40, and I'm happy to see that they're adding that. I don't know how well it works. That's something that would need to be tested, of course, but it's good to see that being added here to a K40 product. Something else that's pretty interesting is the detectors now have the ability to integrate with K40's laser diffusers. Now, that's great, but in my testing, I found that K40's laser jammers are the worst performing laser jammers on the market, but nevertheless, it is pretty cool to see that the windshield mount detector is going to be able to integrate with their laser jammers. Now, this radar detector is going to retail for $470, which personally I think is wildly overpriced, especially if it's basically a DFR9 with no red light camera alerts, but it does add MRCD support. However, something that is new here for this Platinum100 is that it's going to be compatible with K40's remote controls. So if instead of just reaching up to the detector to press the buttons, like the mute button, for example, you can use K40's wired or wireless remote controls. Now, the wireless remote retails for $160, though if you buy it bundled with the detector, the remote's going to cost you an extra 90 bucks. And with this bundle, it's $560, which again, in my opinion, is wildly overpriced for what you're getting here with this detector, but it's a new offering here from K40. Now, a couple days ago, I actually went out to go do some long-range testing, and I meant to pick up a Platinum100, but I honestly forgot to do it for this testing, but I had a chance to test a lot of the top-tier non-aero radar detectors, including the Uniden R3, Radenso Pro M, and the Escort Max 3, as well as some detectors that I don't normally test, including the Whistler CR97 and the Cobra Road Scout. Now, I've got those results posted on the forums, linked in the video description if you'd like to check them out. In short, the Uniden R3 just performed outstanding here with firmware version 1.54, so it looks like this latest update did not neuter the Uniden's performance, which is good to see. Now, the Whistler CR97 did lag a little bit behind the top 3 detectors there, which is to be expected. And then in last place, we had the Cobra Road Scout, which is not really a huge surprise. That's a detector that integrates both a radar detector and a dash cam in one unit, and it's kind of a compromise of both to get a more convenient package with both of them put together. You are going to be getting less range than if you get maybe just a standalone radar detector, and you're not going to be getting as good of a dash cam as if you buy a standalone dash cam and run them independently, but it was good nevertheless just to kind of see what you get if you're going for a package deal like that. Next up, let's take a look at the AntiLaser Priority. There's been some updates here for the ALP. The first one is version 5.6.3. This update was designed to improve the jamming capabilities against a lot of the North American Dragon Eyes. Plus, there were some additional bug fixes and overall stability improvements. Now that said, with testing, people were finding that there were some issues depending on which version of the CPU you had, if you were running TX heads or all regular heads, or even which version of the TX heads you were using. And because of that, ALP has released another update, version 5.6.4, which is being tested now, and it looks like it's starting to come out. This is designed to fix some of the issues depending on what versions of CPUs and TX heads and regular heads you are using. 5.6.4 is not officially released yet, but it looks like it is starting to roll out here for different users. Now, something else worth talking about is the fact that ALP is going to start discontinuing support for the oldest versions of the ALP hardware. If you bought an ALP maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that version of the ALP is going to continue to work, of course, but it's not going to continue to receive updates over time. Now, this is kind of like how every year, a company will release a new cell phone. Like I just got the new iPhone 12 Pro to upgrade over the 8. New phone, right? And it's similar to where, new phones keep coming out. And the older ones, they're still going to keep working, but they're not always going to be getting the latest and greatest updates, especially years down the road, right? Now, it's similar here with the ALP. It first came out 7 years ago, and initially it launched with the Hardware 1 version of the CPU. Eventually, then, they released a newer version of the CPU called version Hardware 2. You can actually go in if you have an ALP and you're wondering which version you have. You can always just pull a stats file and it'll tell you if you've got a Hardware 1 or a Hardware 2 CPU. If you bought it more recently and you have the black CPU, that is going to be a Hardware 4 CPU. Now, depending on which version of the Hardware 2 CPU you have, the older ones are not going to continue receiving updates, but the newer ones are. Now, if you bought your ALP before July of 2015, you can always just check when you purchased the ALP. If you purchased it before then, you're not going to continue receiving new updates over time. If you've bought it since then, it's a newer one, you are going to continue receiving updates. If you're not sure, maybe you're right on the cusp or something, you can always take your ALP CPU serial number and just email it to ALP, and they'll let you know whether or not your CPU is going to continue to receive updates. Now, if you've got an older ALP CPU, either a Hardware 1 or a Hardware 2 that you purchased before July of 2015, ALP has a trade-in program to where you can send in your existing CPU and get the newer Hardware 4 CPU at a discount. Pricing varies depending on which CPU you have, as well as whether or not it works, but it's a nice way to save some cash if you need to purchase the newer Hardware 4 CPU. Again, links to more information about all this stuff will be down in the video description. Next, let's talk about JBV1. It is a great V1 app for Android. Now, JBV1 is updated constantly, and there's always new features that are coming out. One of the notable ones to talk about is it now has voice commands available, just like Highway Radar does. It's now got similar to functionality to where if you're driving and you don't want to have to actually mess with your phone, you can now just issue commands by speaking, which is pretty cool. Additionally, both JBV1 and Highway Radar, the two developers have actually been teaming up for a lot of the features. They both now have support for SABRE, which is pretty awesome. This is basically going to give the ability for third-party developers to create their own plugins for both JBV1 and for Highway Radar to add some additional functionality. So if you're a developer that uses these apps and you'd like to add some more capabilities, you have the ability to do that. If you're a user, like myself, of these different apps, well, there's going to be more people actually adding some new plugins here to add some additional support here for both of these apps. And then speaking of V1 apps, there's also a brand new app that's now available for us iOS users called V1 Companion. This is designed to be a super simple app for the V1 to give you some additional false alert filtering and muting capabilities. It is a $5 app, and it pretty much just has a couple kind of on-off switches to enable or disable different features. For example, you can have the app mute any weak signals that your V1 picks up. You can give it GPS-based low-speed muting, which is pretty common. This way the detector stays quieter around town in different shopping centers and parking lots. If you'd like your detector to alert at full volume and then mute after a couple seconds, which is the way that most detectors behave, you now have that ability here with V1 Companion. Plus, when the app is muting your V1, and let's say maybe it's a high-priority Ka-band signal, and you really want to make sure that even though it's muted, the detector is still getting your attention, you can have it actually flash your V1's display for you just to make sure that you realize something is going on. I personally don't use that feature, but it's cool to kind of see some creative new features being added. The app can also mute signals that are coming from behind, which is something that we kind of had with the V1 Gen 1, but was removed from the Gen 2, so you have some similar functionality here with the app. And as I mentioned, it's designed to be really, really simple. There's not a ton of menus and sub-menus and options and stuff. It's just one page with your display for different alerts and then a couple different features that you can turn on and off. Now, it does not have auto lockouts the way V1 Driver has, and for that reason, I would still prefer personally running V1 Driver, plus I like some of the improved alert logging capabilities, etc. But at half the price, $5 instead of $10, either way, it's great to see another option that's available, and I'm always happy seeing more developers stepping up to contribute and add some new features for us. So a big thanks to Bag and Drag for taking on this cool project here while you were under quarantine. And other than that, yeah, that's it. That's a quick run through here of all the recent changes, new detectors, updates, and things that we can expect here coming down the pipeline in the next couple months. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to continue staying up to date with all the latest information, make sure you subscribe to the channel and enable the notifications, and I'll continue keeping you guys up to date with all the latest and greatest info. And then finally, again, for more information about anything that I talked about here in this video, I know there was a lot of information, links will all be down below in the description. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys are all doing well. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.